give a minute before we start. We got a whole front row here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Nobody in it. Hello. Did you get a program?
How you doing?
Good. Did you get a program, Steve?
I will.
Okay, you got you one.
I just make sure I shut this thing off, because you know what will happen.
Oh, I know. Did I put mine on Do Not Disturb?
I'm gonna go in the corner and get away from everybody.
You won. You got the whole place.
I'm 12 days out of the onset of the virus. So I want to stay away from everybody, but I really doubt if I'm contagious.
Yeah, I don't know what the,
Well, the CDC says 5 days and we can go out.
yeah, I
So
don't
I'll stay
know.
away from everyone.
Better safe than sorry, right? Well, why don't we start? We'll begin with the verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Gotcha of atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. Please stand for the incense offering. Three bows. The fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us, fills our sacred space, guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us with virtue, mindfulness, and wisdom. We offer it on behalf of all beings. Be seated. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for refuge. Being one with the Buddha, I resolve to each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for refuge. Being one with the Dharma, the gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for refuge. Being one with the Sangha, in the spirit of universal fellowship, and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. The Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child. So with the boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. So we'll do a guided meditation tonight. Slide the light down for me. Thank you. As the bell fades, take a few deep breaths. And let your breath settle into a comfortable rhythm. No need to breathe any special way. And as you exhale, just let this phrase ride silently on your breath. May I be happy. And we don't mean, may I be happy sometime in the future. We mean right now, right here. Breathing in, breathing out, finding that happiness that comes from within that's available in the present moment. May I be happy. May I be free from animosity. If any angry thoughts arise while you're sitting and meditating, any ill will toward anyone, any hatred, just let that pass. Don't let it hook you. Don't tell the story about it to yourself. Just let it go. Give yourself freedom from animosity for these 15 or 20 minutes. May I be free from stress and affliction. As we meditate, all kinds of things come into our awareness. Sounds from outside, physical sensations that arise in the body or through contact with the floor or the seat. Thoughts, memories, all kinds of mental fabrications come into our awareness. Everything that arises, we can let go or let be. There's no need to push anything away, no need to cling to anything. Pleasant sensations come and go too, just like unpleasant ones and neutral ones. And if we don't create stress around those things, we don't nurture stress, we don't create affliction, We don't let anger turn into hatred or a worry turn into anxiety. May I be free from stress and affliction. And may I look after myself with ease. Just noticing how the mind moves, noticing when it leaves the meditation object, calmly, gently returning with compassion for ourselves, just letting things go, coming back to the breath, coming back to goodwill. And then call to mind your closest loved one. And imagine that they're with you, or think of their name, visualize them, whatever works for you to feel connected to them. And then take this wish for happiness for yourself and extend it to them. Whatever phrases represents that to you, may they be happy. And if you like, you can visualize that as a light or feel it as a warmth, imagining it extending out from your heart to touch them with your goodwill, your wish for their happiness and their well-being. May they be happy and well. And now think of a good friend, someone you like, or maybe somebody who's helped you in some way, shown you some kindness. And imagine them with you, or think of their name. Connect them to you in some way. And then send them the wish for their happiness also. May they be happy and well. now think of an acquaintance, somebody that maybe you don't know them very well, you haven't formed much of an idea about who they are, or they're just kind of neutral, you don't like them, you don't dislike them. Usually we're that way with people that we've just met, don't really know much yet. But let's send them a wish for their happiness and well being also. You may not know much about them, but you know that, like yourself, they want to be happy, they're seeking well being, comfort, all those things. And like your loved ones, they want happiness. So send them that wish. May they be happy and well. Now think of somebody that you don't like, or maybe somebody you're not getting along with. Now don't pick, if you're new to this, don't pick the person that has hurt you the worst or anything like that. Start small. Start with somebody annoying. And recognize that people who are difficult because they're seeking happiness. They're trying to be well, maybe not doing it skillfully, maybe doing it in ways that create problems for you. But wish them happiness, wish them well being. And notice that as you do that, as you let go of resentment or judgment, that it lightens your own heart. May they be happy and well. And finally, send that wish to all beings. May all beings be happy. Whatever beings there are, big or small, weak or strong, beings that crawl or fly, swim, burrow, whatever they are, may they be happy. All beings are seeking happiness, whatever that means to them, and well being. So may they be happy and well. And you can imagine that thought extending out, radiating out through the world. May all beings be happy. And the bell will ring twice to end the meditation. Before it rings, take a moment, take a few deep breaths, stop the sending out process. Just settle your attention in your nose or your belly. Just focus on the breath for a few moments. You have a supply of goodwill always available to you whenever you need it. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe existing right here now. In reciting the sutras, hearing the Dharma, and training the mind, great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of this Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized, and may they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for the health and well-being of all those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, all those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We pray for those suffering from violence and those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are imprisoned who should be free, for all refugees from violence, hunger, and catastrophe, man-made or natural. May they be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabe sata sadahantu avera sukha jivino katang punya phalang mahang sabe bhagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. Interesting. We don't have anybody watching the live stream. We've had 1 to 2 people since we started, which is weird. I'm wondering if there's a connectivity issue or something. Well, they can watch it later, I guess. So I've been getting a lot of questions about this subject recently. It came up in an email somebody sent me, and in a conversation I had at lunchtime at White Sands with some people. And then last Saturday, we did a retreat day at the prison. And during the week leading up to that, we're talking about what to order in for lunch, because I get to bring in food for them since I keep them in the chapel with me for several hours. And so we talked about what to bring in for lunch. And so this question comes up about, diet and Buddhism, and, what's the relationship and stuff. And I was thinking as I was outlining this, that I tend to shy away from this conversation. I answer the questions when they come up, but I've never given a Dharma talk about this before. And as I was doing the outline, I realized, for one thing, it's complicated. There's really kind of a lot to it. I might not be able to get through it all tonight, but we'll try. And also, people can get kind of emotional about this, either sort of dogmatic in some ways, or reacting to what perceived dogmatism with kind of a defensiveness. But also, I have food issues of my own. And as you can probably tell from looking at my belly, I've always had kind of a difficult relationship with food, emotional eating and things like that. And I've read many times in my life about how there's a thing called the set weight that your body tends to return to. I have never discovered what my set weight is. I've been way underweight, way overweight, and it just always seemed to be the gaining or losing. So, and recently I've learned that aging doesn't make weight management any easier. So, changes in hormone levels and muscle loss and all those things make it harder to maintain a healthy weight. But on top of all that, I'm a Buddhist, and that means that we try to live according to and to develop wisdom and compassion. And so when you take into account the teachings of the Buddha and what he said about food, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot you can kind of use there. And it's hard to practice compassion and not consider the fact that eating involves harming other beings. Now, people will think about eating meat, and this is the question I get a lot. If I become a Buddhist, do I have to be a vegetarian? I've probably been asked that several thousand times. But it's more than just that, because eating anything involves participating in the cycle of living and dying, which means it involves participating in the cycle of suffering. So, when the Buddha to be, Gautama, was young, his first moment of realization, his first kind of inkling of, wanting to get involved with the spiritual life and seeing reality kind of as the issue that it is, came about when he recognized the cycle of eating and being eaten, basically. So he was a prince, more or less. His father was a king, more or less. And every year, at the beginning of the planting season, they would have this big ceremony. And so there was a lot of dancing and singing and festivities and stuff like that. His father, the king, would come out with this jeweled plow being drawn by an ox that was, garlanded in flowers and all of that kind of stuff. And so he was very young. His attendants came out, brought him out to watch the plowing ceremony, and they set him down in the shade of a tree to watch. And as he was sitting there, all these people were dancing and singing and having a great time, but he noticed that the ox drawing the plow was not having much fun. And then he noticed that as the plow was opening up the ground, that it was revealing bugs and worms and things like that, and birds were flying down and feasting on those things. And so he saw this, and he spontaneously, as a child, entered into jhana, into meditative absorption while watching this. And so this was probably planting rice, right? And he realized just watching them plant rice what the cycle of living and dying entailed. So you can be a strictly vegan if you want to, but that doesn't get you off the hook. You're still a part of the cycle of eating and being eaten, pretty much. The Buddha, in fact, once told a group of monks that eating, not just eating meat, but any eating, should be seen almost as if you're being forced to eat your own loved ones in order to survive, which I know is gross, and I don't say that very often, but and certainly not in the morning at White Sands before everybody goes to lunch. But this practice, the practice of Buddhism, is for everyone's benefit, and so we want to avoid causing suffering for everyone. And so, to eat again is whatever you're eating is another living being, just like you. So the question about whether or not to eat meat usually comes up relative to the precepts. People will talk about that. And specifically the first precept, which is, I vow to set my mind on refraining from killing living beings. So I was asking some questions about precepts recently. This is another thing that motivated me to talk about this. So the dictionary definition of a precept is a command or principle intended especially as a general rule of action. So in what we think of as religion in the West, the Abrahamic religions, we usually think of those things as commandments. There's the 10 commandments. Don't do this. Thou shalt not do this, right? It's an order. In Buddhism, it's more the principle intended as a general rule of action. In other words, as a guideline. And so we've decided to take on this practice, and as part of that practice, we're going to train ourselves in a certain way. And so it's a training precept. It's a rule for training. So they're guiding principles. They're not hard and fast laws. It's your life. It's your rebirth. It's your wisdom. And so it's your responsibility to follow those guidelines, is to figure out what that means to you. How best do you do that within the context of your life? So there was a kind of a defining incident, though, that occurred before Gautama was enlightened. And this was when he was 29, he left the palace and went to seek the holy life. And so it was not too long after that. And so he was traveling around studying meditation and ascetic practices and that sort of thing. And on this one occasion, he was walking toward Rajgir, which is a real place, and the Vulture's Peak is there. And there's a mountaintop. And so he came across a large flock of sheep, and he saw that there was a little lamb that had been injured and couldn't walk. And so he picked it up and was carrying it, and he saw the shepherds. And so he went to the shepherds and he said, "Where are you guys going?" And they explained that they were going to Rajgir, into the city, and the sheep were all to be sacrificed. So this was a common thing in India in those days. It was prescribed in the Vedic religions, to do sacrifices for various reasons, for prosperity or to avert catastrophe or whatever it was. And so for whatever reason, the king and some Bimbisara and some priests were going to have a big sacrificing ceremony. And these sheep and a whole bunch of other animals were being taken into town to be sacrificed. So the Buddha went with them into town, and there was a fire burning at an altar where the king was chanting hymns with a group of Brahmins, priests. And these Brahmins were fire worshippers. And so what they were doing was a big uh, puja, a big ceremony involving fires and that kind of stuff. And there were hundreds of animals there waiting to be killed. Well, as they're doing this ceremony, the head priest lifts up his sword to kill the first sheep, and Gotama quickly steps in and stops him and grabs the lead on the goat, or the sheep rather, and pulls it away. And says to the king, don't let these Brahmins destroy these lives. And he turns to the priest and he says, life is precious. All living creatures want to live just like we do. And he said, if people expect mercy, they should show mercy. By the law of karma, those who cause suffering will suffer likewise. So if we expect happiness in the future, we must not harm other creatures. So in making this sacrifice, he was saying, killing all these animals, they'd actually be generating a huge amount of negative karma that they would have to experience the results of at some point in the future. So hearing this speech, the king stopped the sacrifice, and he asked Gotama to stay and become the city's spiritual leader. But he said, no, I haven't become a Buddha yet. He said, I haven't found what I'm looking for yet. And so he left. So after his enlightenment, though, he had precepts for the monks, and they had to take the precept to not kill. And also, when he talked about the Noble Eightfold Path, one of the factors of the path is right livelihood. Right livelihood does not involve raising livestock for slaughter and things like that. So, monks were not supposed to participate in killing of animals. Well, Devadatta was the Buddha's cousin. I'll tell you all about Devadatta one of these days. He was an interesting guy. He was sort of the Buddha's evil cousin. And he tried to take over the Sangha. He was kind of jealous of the Buddha. And I'll explain why one of these days, but they had been rivals ever since childhood. And so he wanted to take over. And so part of what he was trying to do was he was trying to lure a bunch of monks away. Anyway, he went to the Buddha and he said, hey, we should make the monks be vegetarians. Well, the Buddha considered this. He didn't think it was a terrible idea, but he decided that since the monks had already taken the precept to not kill, that he wasn't going to do that, because monks had to live on alms food. So they lived on what they were given. And so he said, no, we need to be easy to maintain. We don't want to require special things of people. And so he allowed them to eat meat and stuff like that, as long as it wasn't killed specifically for them. I think that was probably to prevent people from having big animal sacrifices and slaughters, killing a bunch of animals to give to monks. He didn't want monks to be able to take food under those kinds of circumstances. And he said, you should be grateful for whatever you receive, because specifically because it helps you to live the holy life. People are giving you food in order that you can do what you're doing, in order that you can be a monk. So there was a kind of an interesting example of how this works in real life for monks. There was a very well-known Thai monk, Ajahn Atulo, and a group of monks came to pay their respects to them. And one of them told him, said, I've been meditating for a long time, and I've attained a lot of peace, but I have this problem about eating meat. And he said, even just looking at meat, I start to feel sorry for the animal, that it's lost its life and I'm consuming it. He says, it's like I really lack compassion. When I start worrying about this, I find it hard to bring my mind to peace. So I mentioned the conversation at the prison over this. was one of the guys there, and who happened to not be a vegetarian, by the way. And we decided that some of the pizzas we ordered would be pepperoni pizzas. So, but it was an interesting conversation. He said, how can you be compassionate and eat meat? And it's a good question. And so that's what this monk was saying. And so the Ajahn said, when a monk partakes of the four requisites, he should contemplate them first. If he sees that eating meat is a form of oppression and shows a lack of compassion for animals, he should abstain from eating meat and eat vegetarian food instead. So if you feel that way, that's fine. You don't have to eat meat. He said, but the monastic rule is that you eat what you're given. You only get alms food. So the Buddha directed his monks to be easy to maintain. He didn't want them to demand special things. So a few months later, this same group of monks come back to see the Ajahn. And they said, it's been very difficult to stick with our vegetarian diet because the place where we went, the lay supporters don't eat that way and didn't know anything about vegetarian food. And so it became very hard for them to find and troublesome for them to make. Well, the teacher said that a monk should contemplate the requisites offered, as he said, and when he contemplates that, then if no animal was killed specifically for the monk, if he got the food in an ethical way, and if it was donated to support Buddhist practice, then he should go ahead and eat it. Well, some years later, there was another group of monks who came to Ajahn Atulo, and they were telling him about their vegetarian practice and said, those who eat meat, they support the killing of animals. People like us who only eat vegetables, we're highly compassionate. And they said, and the proof is that when you convert to vegetarianism, it makes your mind peaceful. So Atulo says, well, it's very good that you're vegetarians. I applaud that. It's great that you do that. He said, but as long as you eat meat, that makes sure that it's pure in those three ways, then you're following the Buddhist guidance. And he says, but when you say that your mind becomes peaceful, that has nothing to do with what you put in your stomach. That comes from practicing mindfulness, living in line with the dharma. So as lay supporters, we don't have to worry too much about the monastic rules. We have more choice than monks get. So we can decide to be vegetarian if we want to. It's up to us to get food. And in fact, there are discourses, conversations with the Buddha and lay persons and with some of his senior monks and lay persons that say basically, if there's other food available and if you don't need meat for your health, it's good to avoid eating meat, but it's not required. The fifth factor of the Eightfold Path, right livelihood, says that raising livestock and slaughtering livestock, hunting, fishing, things like that are not right livelihood. And so that kind of affects this issue too. So as Buddhism spread beyond India, monks didn't live on alms food. That wasn't a thing in China. If you went around in China and said, give me food because I'm a monk, they really didn't know what you were talking about. And so monks and monasteries get more involved with growing food and preparing meals and that kind of thing. And so because of the precepts and the principle of right livelihood, they were less likely to eat meat. So that's why when you go to White Sands, they're vegetarian. They get to decide what they eat. And so in keeping with the precepts, they don't eat meat. As householders, as people who have to make a living and support ourselves, even monks like me, we have to be involved in this process. We can take that kind of thing into account. And we live in a very complicated world now. The precepts were never intended to be black and white. As I said, these are guidelines. They're not hard and fast rules. You think about even the first precept, you think, well, that's a pretty easy one. I can refrain from killing other beings. Well, but what about when you get in your car and you drive someplace and you hit a bug? Mm-hmm. The Jains, one of the orders of Jains are really fanatical about this, even to the point where they wear a veil or you'll be having a conversation with one and they're talking to you like this, so you can't understand them because they're afraid they don't want to accidentally inhale something and kill it. So it's not as easy as it sounds. And then when you think about how food works in our society, no human being can survive without causing some suffering. But I think we can be mindful about what we eat and how it affects the world that we live in. And one important thing I think is to see how our food and our habits affect our minds. So we talk about karma, and the usual way of looking at that is, I do a bad thing, I get a bad result. Well, the first bad result is the result on your mind. And so, when I used to write for the News Journal, every year I wrote a big thing about a whole section full of stuff about the Volusia County Fair. And some years I would interview kids who were engaging in like the livestock competitions. They'd raise something and then they'd take it to the fair and show it. Well, some of these kids were raising like calves. And I was having this conversation with this young woman one day, high school student, and I was talking to her about her 600-pound, bull, and it had won a ribbon and all of that, and now it's going off to be auctioned, and she's petting it and calling it by name, and I'm going like, how do you do that? Oh, well, that's what God put them on earth for. I hope it makes me a lot of money so I get another one next year. That's the kind of stuff. I think it would be hard to do that and not have that affect your heart in some way that's probably negative. I understand the rationalizations, but on the other hand, I know a family in this county who's, sixth generation probably. They've been ranchers all this time. And they've got, you can get these, it's not a subsidy exactly. It's like you sort of get an easement from the county to keep your land the way it is. It sort of helps you do it. And they do this and they keep pasture land so that it doesn't turn into subdivisions. So what would you rather have as you're driving across the county? Would you rather see pastures full of cattle, or would you rather see, big tracts of, houses that all look the same, or apartment complexes or whatever? So it's complicated. It's not as easy as just, well, you can't do this. And you get into like factory farming, that's a whole other thing. And looking at how your food affects the environment, things like almond milk, which is apparently almond growing is a very high user of water and stuff like that. So I think we can practice it without setting hard and fast rules for ourselves, but taking into account the impact that we have on the world that we live in. And sort of let that be our responsibility, without judging each other, without condemning ourselves or other people or anything like that, but just recognizing the role we play. And then the other thing is that when you do eat, so this is something that I started doing a few years ago. When I was a Thai monk, every time you eat, you chant before you eat. And basically what you're doing is you're taking you're contemplating the food that you're eating and its importance, the way that Ajahn was talking about. And so the Theravada chant is considering it thoughtfully. I use alms food, not for fun, not for intoxication, not for putting on bulk, not for beautification, but simply for the survival and continuance of this body, for ending its afflictions and for the support of the holy life. Thinking, thus will I destroy old feelings of hunger and not create new feelings from overeating. I will maintain myself, be blameless, and live in comfort. Now you chant that in Pali, so you don't really know what you're doing, but it is a nice contemplation when you think about it. I'm eating for a specific purpose. And I think when you do that, it reminds you of the significance of what you're doing. Zen meal recitation, which we do during retreats, is first 72 labors brought us this food. We should know how it comes to us. So whenever we eat, we can be grateful. When I was a kid, we said a blessing at the table before every meal, and it's kind of that same thing. So we should take a moment to be grateful for the fact that we have food. As we receive this offering, we should consider whether our virtue and practice deserve it. Now that's a monk thing. You can think about that. Am I giving back as much as I'm getting in terms of my spirituality? Third, as we desire the natural order of mind to be free from clinging, we must be freed from greed. So just because the first bite is good doesn't mean you need to eat the whole cake, right? Fourth, to support our life, we take this food. So why am I eating? I'm eating to support life. Like the Theravada thing says, not for fun, not to make me better looking, but to support my life. And fifth, to attain our way, we take this food. So anyway, I think it's worth taking the time to be thoughtful about it. We don't, in Buddhism, when we talk about karma, we're talking about our karma, not other people's karma. So, like I said, some people can get very emotional about this, telling people, oh, you should be a vegetarian, or no, you shouldn't tell me what to eat, that kind of thing. So, it's our rules, our responsibilities. And so that's it. So any questions or comments? Yeah.
So personally, even as a very young man, I always thought I should be a vegetarian, but I've always had a lot of trouble.
Oh yeah.
I've never really been successful. And then I thought, someday maybe I can get the karma straight by, having a little piece of land, and I can get a cow, and I can get a chicken and a pig, and I can let them live out their entire lives in safety, right? Maybe that helps straighten out my karma. Now I realize if I try to do that, the cow would probably outlive me at this point, and it probably wouldn't work. Anyway, it's just a crazy thing. I wish I could be better at it.
Yeah. Well, it's a practice. So, you work on it. You're doing the right thing by even thinking about it. And I went through the same thing. I mean, when I was like 13 years old, I guess it was, I was diagnosed with a bunch of allergies. And so I got real interested in food and like what food was doing to my body and all that kind of stuff. And I became a vegetarian. And to her credit, my mom put up with it. Now I grew up in Texas where if it doesn't have beef and gravy, it's not a meal, but we managed. And I'm kind of with you. It's like, it's very difficult to manage weight and energy and all of that kind of stuff. I've gone for periods of time where I didn't eat any meat at all, or maybe I would eat fish, but it's very hard to sustain and to maintain health with. But you do what you can, within reason.
I was recently diagnosed with high cholesterol, right? So getting older kind of thing, and I was looking it up, I was doing a lot of research, and found out that basically we eat cholesterol when we eat animal protein. Mm-hmm. So I was like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Doctor didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, that's easy enough. I'll just not eat so much meat, It's been great. I mean, I feel better. I'm not completely vegetarian, but a lot less. And when I have meat, it's like not so processed. Like I cook it myself. I try to make it, like a treat.
Yeah.
So that's kind of I give myself a little treat, once a week or something. Like fish a little bit more often, but.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing these days. Not very much meat at all, but looking at it as something that it's hard, I was just reading this thing about how older people need to get more protein than younger people. It's like, okay, well, how do you do that and not eat meat? It's hard to do.
I've always found that I'm finding the reading I'm doing is just like the older you get, the less meat you should have. Like it's not doing anything good for your body.
Well, so again, you need the protein, but you don't need the cholesterol and the
Yeah,
fats,
that's
right?
right.
So,
And that's their good source of protein.
Right.
Like all different kinds, and that's when you have to
Yeah.
do, like I said, which ones are just the best. But that's a good. They say a substitute source if you don't want meat.
yeah, and they're also very high in calories, very high in fat. So, you find the balance. Find the balance. Do what you can. Do what makes sense to you and your body, and that's different for everybody, I think. So anyway. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention. And it's about 8:00, so we should close. Let's do the great vows. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Enlightened ways unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are marvelous. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Stand. Three vows to the altar. One to the teacher. One to each other. Thank you very much. See you next week.